We are back. This is the first Sunday of the month, so it's the day that we study the book Between Heaven and Earth. It is a book that has a very complex story with a lot of characters. So what I started doing since last month is to give an overview of what we study. So I'm going to share here the screen on what we study. I'm going to read quickly what we study on the previous chapters of what's relevant. So chapter 1 and 2 doesn't have much to do with the story, so we're not going to go back there. On chapter 3, we found the obsessive situation in Evelina's home. Odila, her discarnate mother, jealous of her husband and wanting to avenge the death of her son Julio. Evelina's brother, who drowned through the carelessness and indirect guilt of Zulmira, who is Amaro's second wife. Odila harasses her, vampirizing her body in an attempt to cause her death. And then we saw the care necessary for the solution of Odila's obsessive process over Zulmira. Again, the names will repeat and we'll say who is who here to make it easier. On chapter 4, we see that Odila haunts Zulmira in the moments of her partial spiritual detachment during sleep. Clarencio, the mentor and the guide of Andre Luiz and Hilario, explains the reasons why Zulmira is not directly to blame for Julio's death. Zulmira, enraged by her husband's jealousy towards her stepson, ardently desired his death and omitted herself when she could have saved him. Because Odila, being discarnated, couldn't see Julio after her death because of the sexual nature of her spiritual imbalance, which occurred after her discarnation. Last month, we saw on chapter 5 the intense spiritual activity observed at the city beach in Rio de Janeiro at night. And then we were explained that the marine atmosphere is a revitalizing source for the spiritual organism of those directly or indirectly associated with denser material fluids. And the psychosomatic treatment undergone by a lady that had cancer, who is temporarily separated from her physical body during sleep. The purposes of the treatment for this lady was explained. We discussed that somatic disorders can be corrected by acting on the psychosoma, somatic physical disorders. Long-lasting illnesses, a valuable preparatory course for the process of passing away. And then we saw the conflict between Odila and Zulmira, spiritually detached from their dense vehicle during sleep. Okay, on chapter 6, we discussed the arrangements for a visit to young Julio at the spiritual home where he was taken when he drowned. But before going there, they will go to the home of Antonina, who's a grieving mother who had also recently lost her son. And we see worship a gospel at home in Antonina's home. And the topic that they study, forgiveness. Antonina with 2 sons and a daughter that are still incarnated, and she presides the gospel at home. And we are introduced to a character, a spirit that is sitting there, an old man that is sitting there in the room that didn't notice the group of spirits. Clarencio leaves to search for the other mother that they are going to take to this place together with Antonina during her sleep, to this place where Julio is, this spiritual home, this colony that we're not going to see today, still going to happen only on the next Sunday that we study this book. Just for you to have an idea how complex is this book, I'm going to show you the characters that we're not going to go today into this because it's too complex, and there's a lot of characters that were not introduced. But this is the present incarnation in red, the black color is the previous incarnation, and the bluish is the future incarnation. We're going to be introduced to all these characters in the future, and we come back to this, but don't worry about it. It's very complex. That's why I thought it was important to have this graphic here for future reference as we continue to study the book, okay? I know it's a lot of information, but we are going to go over as we go through the book. Okay, so now let me share the book here. Any questions related to what we studied before? Any doubts? Because it's better if we know what we're talking about to make it easier for us to understand it in the future. Wayne, I know you sent some questions, but the Q&A was last Sunday.
My vacation got me confused.
Yeah, I'll save it for next one, okay? Zoraida, can you read for us?
Okay, absolutely.
It's clear enough because it's a little bit smaller than it was last month.
Yeah, I could see it.
Okay, all right, let's go.
Okay, chapter 7, an imbalanced conscience. In compliance with our orders, we waited for Antonina in the small room where the family gospel meeting had been held. We were now able to examine the elderly, discarded man more closely. Downcast and shaky, he looked just as he did when alive. He seemed troubled and demented. We tried to approach him, but it was useless. He couldn't see us. I reminded Hilario that we could make ourselves solider by concentrating our wills, which we did. Looking as if we had just arrived, he was immediately interested. The man hurried over to us, exclaiming, "Are you officers or soldiers? Are you pro or con?" The haggard look in his eyes confirmed that he was insane. Hilario and I exchanged looks of curiosity and surprise. Before we could say anything, the man began weeping convulsively, asking, "Who brought up the idea of forgiveness? How am I to regard that issue? Should I forgive or should I be forgiven? I don't see the point of a weak woman and 3 kids discussing such a matter. Such discussions should be reserved for troubled people like me, who have a volcano in the middle of their head." After he said that, his face changed. He seemed even further out of touch with reality, even more out of his mind. Almost shouting, he continued, "Everything would have been different if they had let me meet the new general. He would have understood my situation. It was the marshal's plan to order me into his exclusive service, but because of my wretched persecutor, I was transferred unfairly." Our unexpected friend scanned the corners of the room as if he was afraid of someone might be listening, and continued, "Listen to me. My persecutor not only planned to keep me from the favors of the sick marshal, but he also planned to keep me from that woman, Lola Abaruri. But how could I possibly have not wanted her with such passion? Why would I have to go to Fencho the Moros? Their intent to do me harm was obvious. Of course, I was forced to leave, but I went no further than Targura. General Porodoro wouldn't abandon me. Okay. I needed to go back to Luque, so I did. That bastard Estevez, however, never gave up. Besides violating my rights as a medic at General Headquarters, he stole Lola's love from me. Lovely Abaruri was mine no more. She had surrendered to my disloyal friend. Our guardian and little orange orchard were forgotten. Who would dare say that I had not sacrificed myself to provide a nice home for that perfidious woman? For one long and awful month, I longed to return to her love. When I finally did, on that starry night in May, I found her in the arms of that traitor. She tried to make excuses, but I had caught them red-handed. I felt like getting my revenge as soon as I could by stabbing him with my dagger. But the troops were to leave town in 3 days, and my enemy, who had kept himself hidden in the darkness so I couldn't get to him, ran off to join them when they left for Ataguai. Hatred began dominating and blinding me. I would find him somehow. I would embrace him with the same pretended cordiality that he had embraced me with the first time, and I would take his life. And I did. I pretended to have forgotten what had happened, and I approached him with a smile. And as I smiled, I poisoned him. But believe me, I dared commit such an act because he was imprudent, libertine, and cruel. He would have murdered me if I had not taken the opportunity to get him first.
Thanks, Zoraida. Okay, so it's in this chapter we will read a lot of a soap opera story. Okay, it takes place. This old man, it's a spirit, disturbed spirit that is there at Antonina's home, and we'll find why very soon. The first thing, and I'm not going to go into the story that much because it's not really, we're not here to discuss historical aspects, just what's important for our discussion of the book. Okay, so the first thing here is that Andre Luiz and Hilario approaches him, but he cannot see them. We have to remember that less evolved spirits cannot see more evolved spirits unless the more evolved spirits make themselves visible, okay, to less evolved spirits. We go back to the very beginning of the book No Solar, when Andre Luiz is in the lower zones, and he's there for 8 years. And then finally, we see the same Clarencio that is in this book. We see Andre Luiz talking to Clarencio and asking Clarencio, where were you all this time? And Clarencio said, we were always here. You were not ready to see us. So in this case, Andre Luiz reminds Hilario that they could make themselves visible to this old man, and they do it by concentrating their wills, right? By more evolved spirits, they learn how to make themselves visible to less evolved spirits. But if they want to pass unnoticed by less evolved spirits, that can go through without being seen. And this is discussed a lot in Andre Luiz books. In the book Missionaries of the Light, when we have Segismundo's preparing for the new reincarnation, they go to visit their future parents in sleep, and the mother detaches herself from the physical body, only sees her grandmother, doesn't see the team, and the future father only sees Segismundo and tries to go back to his physical body, very scared. So again, we see according to our level of vibrations, we see spirits that are vibrating at the same level. Above us, we can only see if they make themselves visible to us. So he starts asking, are you officers or soldiers? Okay, so what we're going to read here takes place in the Paraguayan War in Brazil, which is, if this country has a stain, which is the Civil War, the United States, Brazil's stain is the Paraguayan War that happened around the same time as the Civil War here. And that was a very bloody war that Brazil and then Argentina and Uruguay fought against Paraguay. And Paraguay ended up losing the battle, the war, and never recovered. It lost most of its population. Until today, Paraguay hasn't fully recovered from the war because it's still a very poor country. Brazil, again, when we talk about collective karma, Brazil has been helping Paraguay through legal and illegal ways since the end of the war to make the country survive and grow. Of course, Brazil is the biggest trade partner for Paraguay. A lot of illegal smuggling goes to Brazil through Paraguay. So they made their lives basically because of Brazil. But Brazil was really, it's a big karma that Brazil has the war and also the slavery, the two big collective karmas that the country has. Okay, so everything that we're reading after this, when he describes everything that he goes through is in the Paraguayan War. Okay, but before we get there, he's clearly disturbed. He watches the gospel at home, the idea of forgiveness that was discussed last month, and actually the forgiveness that they discussed was more towards the father that had left Antonina and the children behind. But this old man, whose name is Leonardo, is very confused and doesn't understand why they're discussing a weak woman and kids discussing forgiveness, if he's the one that needs or should give forgiveness according to his disturbed mind. And then he starts discussing what happened to him. He was an officer in the war, and then he was sent to some place, and then he was what we can see here, that there's a new character involved here, Lola Ibarruri, which is a Paraguayan woman at the time of the war. Spoiler alert, she's Antonina reincarnated, but we'll see that later. And then he talks about he had to go look in Argentina, the General Polidoro, some names. He was married to Lola, or he was living with Lola, I don't know. Then he comes back from war, finds her in the arms of someone else that we are going to meet later. He kills him, and he tells that if he hasn't killed him, he would have killed him first, Leonardo, and a lot of a drama, but we're not going to go deeper into the drama. Okay. Any questions, comments, Elmo? Anything to add here? You're on mute, Elmo.
No, the only thing that's interesting is that we see especially in the spiritual world, how the guilt consciences have this necessity of letting out that's guilty. Who asked him anything? Who asked him about his past? Why he goes start babbling about his own past just like that? Not even introduction yet, and he gives out his whole history, his guilt mind. Why is it so guilty? It's a necessity that I have noticed, especially as a discarnate spirit, for us to relieve ourselves of that thing that we're holding inside for so long.
Yeah. And also we are going to see that later, but why is he at Antonina's house, right? Antonina, he's going to say that Antonina is his granddaughter. That's the only one that remembers him and cares for him. And when we learn that Antonina was really Lola in previous incarnation, it all makes even more sense why he's there, right? Okay. More of the story.
Okay, we continue.
Yeah.
He paused briefly, knelt in front of us, and began to clamor again. Oh, I know I did what was right, but that man has never left me alone since. I have fought so hard. I got married and had a big family. I devoted myself to religion. I partook of the benefits of the holy sacraments, and I thought everything had been taken care of. But after I die from old age and infirmity, instead of heaven, which now seems even further away, I realized that that man is still persecuting me. I may have said goodbye to my worn out bones years ago, but I'm walking around afflicted and wrenched, carrying hell around inside myself. At first, I looked for my grave in the hopes of raising my remains and hiding myself in them to forget. But I could see that that was impossible. So I fled forever the place that housed my remains. Now I devote streets and squares in search of someone with authority to help me. He passed his hand over his face to wipe away the tears and continued. Kind sirs that you must be, even if my wrong was so dreadful, I spend such a long time with this merciless monster staring at me. Wouldn't that be enough expiation for my redemption? If I confessed a crime and thus spend less time in prison, wouldn't I be redeemed before the courts? Perceiving that we should say something to console him, I put my hand on his white hair and said, trying to be kindly, compose yourself, brother. Who of us hasn't stumbled on the pathway of life? Your pain is not unique. Our spirits are also cluttered with troubling memories. Tears of despair do the soul no good. From what he had told us, I perceived that the old man was remembering the time of the war with Paraguay. In an effort to piece things together so as to form a connection between past and present, I asked, what new general do you mean? Ah, you don't know? And like someone completely stuck in the details of the past, he stated, I can remember it exactly. Yes, his proclamation was made on April 16th. Prince de Gustavo de Orleans may have been the new supreme commander, but the marshal's departure weighed heavily on me. What marshal? I asked, stoking his memory. Marshal Helme, Xavier de Souza. He was my friend, my protector. Sick and worn out, he needed me, but they took him from me. Estevez, that faithless dog. His voice faded, his eyes bugged out, and as if he were being inwardly attacked by dreadful forces imperceptible to us, he began to complain in despair. I can't go on. He's getting larger again with me. He's looking at me in disgust, and I can still hear his last words in the thrones of death. No, no, he cried in obvious anguish. I shall free myself, and I shall free myself. I have faith. Deeply moved, I replied, yes, my friend, faith is a miraculous lifesaver of all who have fallen overboard. Have you ever tried prayer? Have you asked Jesus to support and assist you? Yes, yes. Haven't you gotten any sign of heavenly help yet? The wrench focused his troubled eyes on me and said, a few days ago, I went to the church of the Rosary, recalling, as always, my having gone there the day before I left for the war. I prayed so hard, I received the blessing of seeing the marshal, who suddenly appeared to me. He was much younger and incredibly remade. I begged him for his protection, and he told me that my case would be evaluated, that I shall rest, because as great as our wrongs might be, even greater is the compassion of God, who never leaves us helpless. With a gesture of profound trouble, he added, but so far I haven't gotten the smallest sign of renewal on my path. I caressed his snow white hair and remarked, even so, you have to believe that Jesus' goodness will not forsake us. Promise you'll help me. Have mercy on me. My heart deeply touched by such an appeal. I promise to help him find peace and support.
Okay. A lot of more story here that we're not going to get too much into details. But what is interesting that he describes what he did after killing his enemy. He got married, had a big family, devoted himself to religion, partook the benefits of Holy Sacrament. So in his physical incarnation, he put away the crime into his subconscious and thought that everything has been taken care of. But again, our own conscience is what judges us. So when he dies, instead of going to heaven, which is what he thought he had built with his straight life after the incident, he's still seeing the man that killed him persecuting him, and he sees this man around. And just again, something very interesting. It's not the spirit of this man that he killed that is persecuting him. Is the image that he makes on his own mind, because this spirit we are going to see later is already reincarnated. It's already, and we are going to meet him later in the book, this man that he killed. So it's not the reincarnated whose name is Mario, by the way, in the future, we're going to see him, that is persecuting him. It's him, his own mind persecuting him with the image of this Esteves that he killed, right? He mentioned here Esteves, right? So he tried to go back to his tomb. He cannot stay there. He tried to go into the remains. So he wanders the streets. Andre Luiz, of course, you know, we don't have Clarencio here. He's not at his home. So the ability of Andre Luiz and Hilario to console and help him is limited because they don't have the knowledge and the understanding of how to deal with these situations. And Clarencio is arriving very soon, and we'll see the different approach. But and then he continues talking about what happened, some other names that doesn't really matter to us very much. The Marshal, the Prince. He talking about the Paraguayan War, and he still talks about seeing. He's looking at me in disgust, and I can still hear his last words at the throes of death. He's still remembering what happened. It's still his own mind obsessing him. Okay. Andre Luiz tries to console him, asks him if he went looking for help, and he talks about going to the church, praying hard, and because of the prayer, he's able to see the Marshal, who was his protector, much younger and incredibly remade, meaning already with a new physical body recovered or already back in the spiritual world, but with a younger form that we change when we go back to the spiritual world. We don't know here. It's not explained, and it doesn't explain further in the book. So, but it doesn't really matter. But he's asking for helping and protection. And he says that so far he hasn't gotten any sign of renewal, not understanding that the very presence of Andre Luiz, Hilario, and Clarencio is the help that he asked for and is now there to help him, but he's still not aware of it. Okay, that's basically it for this part. It's a lot of more information. Elmo, anything to add here?
No.
Any questions? Okay, now Clarencio is back. That's going to help us all. Zoraida. You're mute, Zoraida.
Sorry.
Okay.
You started just as, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Just as the poor man was about to embrace me, Clarencio entered with the female ward that would be accompanying us on the trip. Kind and humble, after greeting us, she kept her distance. In an instant, Clarencio grasped what was happening, concentrated for a few moments, making himself denser in order to help more readily. Greeted by the old man, he stroked his brow and informed us. He's deranged. His mind is stuck in obsessive memories. More experienced than us, Clarencio held him in his arms with fatherly care, thereby winning his trust. He asked, "What are you searching for, my brother?" "I have come to beg Antonina, my granddaughter, to help me. She is the only one who remembers me with love. Of all the members of my family, she alone holds a place for me in her heart." When he began his complaining all over again, the minister put his hand on the man's head as if to make a detailed inspection about what was going on inside him, and then informed us, "This is our brother Leonardo Perez, who discarnate nearly 20 years ago. When he was younger, he was employed by Marshal Guilherme Xavier de Soares, but now his mind is stuck on a crime of poisoning that he was involved with when he was a member of the Brazilian army encamped in Paraguay. We can't see all the details of the crime on the screen of the memories that torment him. It is a festival Sunday during the campaign, July 11th, 1869. Mass is being celebrated out in the field by a Capuchino monk, Count de Roux, and the pompous officers from army headquarters are there. Our still young friend is among the infantrymen. However, he isn't interested in the grave warnings of the priest during the rite, nor the ardent patriotic appeal by the general, who delivers a brilliant and inspired speech to the soldiers. Instead, he is gazing impertinently at a recent arrived soldier from Atagua, a special services medic, Jose Estevez, a restless 30-year-old Brazilian with dark, intelligent eyes and stately bearing. He shares with our friend the affections of a beautiful woman who has left her husband and son for the pleasure of adventure. Paez disapproves of the beloved creature's favors toward the patrician. He hates him, but pretends to be unaware of the situation, appearing well-mannered and gentile. When Mass is over, he invites Estevez for a friendly meal. They talk enthusiastically about nights out in Rio, eager to return to the excitement. Estevez shares Leonardo's feelings. He trusts him as they chat until an improvised tavern, his vengeful colleagues, offers him a glass of wine laced with deadly poison. He drinks it, feels dizzy, and dies, cursing Paez. The incident causes quite a stir. An Argentine medic is called to the scene and verifies the poisoning, but the authorities deem silent as the best approach under the circumstances. The troops en route to Paraguay, and the case is closed without further investigation. Leonardo Paez accompanies the army to the front lines and tries to forget what happened. He keeps his relationship with the woman of his desires for a while longer, but upon returning to Brazil, he loses interest in her and gets married, leaving several descendants. He discarnates in ill health, however. On his deathbed, he realized that the memory of his crime is whipping him on the inside. He ignores nearly all the other episodes of his life to concentrate solely on this one. Jose Estevez has already reincarnated, while Leonardo Paez lives with the image of the murder, which comes back to life every day in his memory at the influx of suggestions from his own guilty conscience. As we can see, it is the natural fulfillment of the law of cause and effect. Just then, Antonina and her subtle body came to meet us at the door to the room where her body was asleep.
Okay, that's the end of the chapter. Clarencio arrives, right? And of course, Clarencio much more prepared than Andre Luiz and Hilario. He sees what's going on. First, he arrives he went to pick up the other lady that is going, they are going to an incarnated mother who lost her child also, like Antonina, and that is going to accompany them in the visit to the place where Julio is, okay? Just to remember what we are talking about here, right? So she arrives, she greets them and keeps her distance. Clarencio then concentrates for a few moments and tells Andre Luiz and Hilario that Leonardo is deranged, mind stuck in obsessive memories, right? Leonardo says that he has come to beg Antonina, the granddaughter, to help him, that she's the only one that remembers him with love. Why is that? Because she's Lola reincarnated, and he loves her first as Lola and then as the granddaughter. And he says that of all the members of the family, she's the one that holds a place for me in her heart, of course, because she's related to him from a previous incarnation. So she has a special affection for her grandfather without knowing that he was her lover in the previous incarnation. And then he describes exactly what really happened with Leonardo Pires, the marshal. He mentions Count de. Count de was the son-in-law of the Emperor of Brazil, on the war. Brazil was an empire at that time, and the emperor put his son-in-law in charge of the army. He had only one daughter, who was the one, Isabel, who freed the slaves later in Brazil, the one responsible for freeing the slaves later in 1888. There is a mass, and he talks about when José Esteves, the lover of Lola Ibarrauri, arrives, and Pires Leonardo approaches him, engages in friendly conversation, and then poisons him. He ends up at the end of the war. He continues his relationship with Lola for some time, but then loses interest in her, goes back to Brazil, forms the family. That's what we read in the previous discussion. He dies, and that's when where I mark gets interesting, right? The memory of the crime is the only thing that he focused on his life. All other episodes of his life, he forgets to concentrate solely on this one. You see what our mind, the tricks that our mind plays on us when we have a guilty conscience. Everything that is related to our guilty actions come back to haunt us, and we tend to forget everything else, especially if the guilty is very strong, like an assassination. So Clarencio explains that José Esteves, already reincarnated by Leonardo, lives with the image of the murder that comes back to haunt him every day. So it's not José Esteves himself, the spirit, that comes to haunt him. It's the memory of Leonardo that comes back to haunt him. It's the cause, the law of cause and effect. And then Antonina wakes up, doesn't wake up, detached from the physical body that is sleeping, and comes to see them at the door of the room where she was asleep. Okay, so that's the end of the chapter. A lot of story in this chapter, but you serve to build up for us for the rest of the book, what we are going to be discussing, the law of cause and effect, which is the basic of the story of this book. A lot of it is the law of cause and effect, cause and consequence, action and reaction. Okay, Elmo, any final comments on this chapter?
No, Joe.
Right, any additional questions here, comments? Okay, I hope you're entertained by the story. It's an interesting one. So now we're going to go to prepare for the trip to the spiritual colony where Julio is based, was taken when he drowned. Julio is 8 years old, remember, when he went back to the spiritual world, and a child that goes back to the spiritual world in the situation that he did, goes back to the spiritual world as a child and continues for some time, or even for until the next reincarnation as a child. Okay, but we'll address that later. Let's read a little bit about this delightful trip.
Okay. Chapter 8, A Delightful Trip. The discarnate elderly man showed complete indifference during Clarence's narrative, but as if Antonina's presence had reawakened his interest, he looked at her with a sudden glow in his eyes and cried, "Antonina, Antonina, help me. I'm scared, so scared." Antonina, who appeared much more delicate and beautiful outside her dense body, gazed at him sadly and asked with a sorrowful look, "Grandpa, what are you doing here?" The old man knelt down and implored, "Please help me. Except for you, my whole family has forgotten me. Please don't forsake me. My sworn enemy is torturing me inside. He's like a demon living in my conscience." He tried to embrace her, but Clarenzo stopped him. "Listen, my friend, our brothers have promised to help you, and of course they will. But for now, Antonina has to go with us for a few hours." Embracing him paternally, he suggested, "You can help her too. Watch over her home while the kids are asleep. In return, tomorrow you will receive the help you need." The old man smiled in compliance and settled down. We left him alone in the small room and went out into the night. Joining hands and keeping our sisters within the closed circuit of our energies, We started out on a lovely trip. Who on earth could ever imagine the delightful sensations of being a free soul? Traveling at the speed of thought, we advanced into the night's darkness, leaving behind the glow of a colorful and enchanting dawn. When we reached a lovely, softly lit area containing an impressive and welcoming park, I noticed the ecstatic, happy look on our female companions' faces. Donna Antonina, supported on Clarenzo's arm as if she were his daughter, asked in wonder, "Why don't we make this trip a definitive transference? The body becomes so heavy, like an unbearable cross of flesh, the moment we sense the earth from afar." "You're right," agreed the other sister. "Why can't we just stay and forget about the heartaches and disappointments of the world?" "We know what you mean," replied the minister. "We know how much trouble afflicts the incarnate spirit, especially when it awakens the beauty of the spirit world. However, we must praise the opportunity to serve and never scorn it. We are still a long ways from full redemption, and all of us, with longer or shorter alternatives, must embrace the struggle of the flesh in order to pay off our debts in the worthy manner, our old debts in a worthy manner. We are travelers across unending millennia. Yesterday we were helped. Today it is our turn to help. As we continue on, waves of fragrance increased all around us, restoring our energies and inducing us to take deep breaths. Delicate flowers hung abundantly from wholesome trees, sensing the light breezes that whispered enchanting melodies. As if his chest were bursting with light, Clarenzo smiled benevolently. He couldn't even speak. We all felt magnetized and touched by the beauty of the magnificent landscape. Antonina, beaming with insatiable curiosity mixed with joy, and exclaimed, "Ah, if only we could die right now. If only the flesh no longer weighed on us." The minister replied with a grave tone of voice, but without losing his customary kindness. "If you were to abandon your vehicle of dense matter right now, how do you know you would be happy? Which of us could enjoy supreme bliss without perfect personal sublimation?" And looking at Antonina with kindness mixed with compassion, he went on, "You're about to visit blessed little children whom death has temporarily snatched from earthly life. You feel like you are in a golden palace in the midst of paradise of love. But what about the children you have left behind? Could there really be heaven without the presence of those we love? Could we have peace without the joy of those who live in our hearts? Let's say that the shackles of the physical prison were removed from right now. The tormented human home would increase in importance in the nostalgia that would overwhelm you. The memory of the children still imprisoned on a planet would enchain you to the physical rim like a strong root holding the tree to the dark ground. The cries and groans, the struggles, the trials of your unhappy children will speak to your spirits more loudly than the songs of blessedness by happy children, and you would naturally go down from heaven to earth, preferring to be unseen, anguished servants who would have traded the resplendent glory of freedom for the dolorous torments of prison, for the greatest blessedness of one who loves, lies, and giving oneself on behalf of one's beloved children. The two women listened to these wise words in silence. After a short pause, the instructor continued, we are all one another's debtors. 1,000 ties bind our hearts to each other. For now, there is no perfect paradise for anyone who returns from earth, just as there is no complete purgatory for anyone who returns to the human maelstrom. Love is a divine force that nourishes us in every area of life, and our best asset is our mutual help for one another. In the light-bathed area, I felt greater veneration for nature, which is in every sphere, is a book revealing the eternal wisdom. Smitten by an inexpressible joy, our sisters look like lovely sleeping Madonnas suddenly come to life right there in front of us.
Thanks, Raida. Okay, a lot of things here, but it's more or less the same, right? First, they leave the home. Leonardo asks for Antonina for help. Antonina recognizes, asks the grandpa what he's doing there. But Clarencio tells him, listen, take care of the children, because Antonina has to leave them for a few hours. They are sleeping, of course. But he's trying to give him, Leonardo, an objective for him to calm down and forget a little bit about his own disturbed mind. And then he promises that they will come back tomorrow with the help that he needs. So they leave the room, traveling at the speed of thought. So again, spirits, evolved spirits travel at the speed of thought. You think of a place and you are there. Of course, this is a journey. They are carrying two spirits that are incarnated, the two ladies. So it takes some work from them. But the description here, again, is that they leave the house and they immediately reach the other area, lovely, softly lit area. And I always like to give the example of the book The Messengers, right? When it's the first venture of Andre Luiz outside Nosso Lar, that he's coming from Nosso Lar to Earth, and it takes 2/3 of the book for him to reach Earth. So he couldn't travel at the speed of thought. He had to walk slowly throughout the lower zones and until stopping in the house of assistance, transitory house of assistance that is well described in the book, and then coming to arriving at on Earth later in the book. Of course, Antonina and the other lady, they are in a state of awe, and they ask why they cannot leave the physical body behind, right? Because they are feeling so much happiness in this excursion that they don't want to go back to their troubled lives in the physical world. They don't want to wake up. Like sometimes when we are having these pleasant dreams at night, when we wake up, we think, I would like to go back to the dream. The dream was so good. And so that's exactly what they are experiencing here, right? But Clarencio replies, we have to go through our reincarnation. And the struggle of the flesh is what happens to us in order to pay off our old debt in a worthy manner. And he talks about being helped and helped, which is our objective as we evolve. Andre Luiz describes the place around them. I made a note here because there is a mistake on the translation when they said here, as if his chest were bursting with light. Clarencio smiled benevolently. He couldn't even speak, which seems not very right for a superior spirit. The original in Portuguese is he stayed quiet. He could speak, he chose not to, okay? So because of course as an evolved spirit, he will be able to speak here in this ambient whenever he wanted. So just a side note, because I don't want to pick people to misinterpret what really happened. The ladies continued, if we could die, if we didn't have the physical body no longer, and Clarencio tells them, if you leave your dense matter behind, are you sure you'll be happy? How are you sure you'll be happy if you are leaving behind those that we love? Would we have peace without the joy of those who live in our hearts? Again, we have relations that are our loved ones, and we are, even if we go back to the spiritual world, we continue care for them. And Antonina specifically, that we know deeply, she has 3 young kids. The father has abandoned the family. How could she leave them behind? She would never find peace in the spiritual world. She would find only guilty learning that she voluntarily left her physical body behind, right? As Clarencio says, the cries and groans, the struggles and trials of your unhappy children would speak to your spirits more loudly than the songs of blessedness by happy children. And you naturally go down from heaven to earth. You end up like the old man there, stuck in the guilty conscience of the incarnated world, surrounding those in the incarnated world. So he goes on explaining our connections. We cannot fully evolve individually. We need to evolve with our loved ones. And we see this discussion a lot in the books of Andre Luiz. We heard about Dr. Bezerra de Menezes, one of the spiritual guides of Brazil and of Spiritism, that had the opportunity to go to a more evolved world and decided to stay behind to help the country and the spirits that he loves deeply. Okay, Elmo, some things to add here, please.
It's hard to add. I think it tells us here that the true sense of true happiness, not the momentary happiness, is the fulfillment of our duties, the responsibilities that you assumed. Yeah, it'll be fine for a short period to enjoy a vacation, so to say, in that spheres where they were, but eventually, as you know, we do here also have to come back to do our job, have to come back from this vacation and fulfill our duties, because that's the true sense of happiness.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, let's continue. This is a short one because there's a lot of things in one paragraph.
Okay. It is by means of toil, continued Clarencio, that we gradually rid ourselves of our imperfections. In its old physical expression, earth is nothing but energy that has been condensed since the immemorial, shaken and transformed by incessant labor. And as God's creatures on the most varied levels of the evolutionary ladder, we perfect our faculties and grow in knowledge and sublimation through service. As it crawls along, the worm toils on behalf of both the soil and itself, breathing and bearing fruit. The plant aids, but both the atmosphere and itself. The animal, continuously struggling, is useful to the soil on which it grows, acquiring experiences that are valuable to it. In our own souls, on their ongoing journeys through varied forms, acquired qualities that are indispensable for the sublime ascent. We are children of eternity, acting for the glory of true life, and only by toiling in accordance with the divine law will we ever reach the final objective of our forward march.
Okay, thanks. It's just one paragraph, but Clarencio talks so much in this short paragraph, like evolved spirits usually do, right? Through our evolutionary path, in our incarnations is how we gradually rid ourselves of our imperfections. That's a very important concept here. When we spend time in the spiritual world, we learn. We can learn, we can evolve in the spiritual world, but we will only test and put in practice our learning when we come back to our reincarnation until we reach the level of a perfected spirit, right? So what we have here on this planet, Earth, as he explains here, Earth is nothing but energy that has been condensed since time immemorial. We know that matter is energy, condensed energy, right? The Earth is shaken and transformed by incessant labor, meaning Earth is evolving since the beginning, since its creation. And then he talks about God's creatures in the most varied levels of evolutionary ladder. That as we grow in knowledge and sublimation through service, starting from the mineral, where we learn, the spiritual principle, learn aggregation, union, and separation from as matter. And then he talks about the plant, the worm, that toils on behalf of both the soil and itself, changes the soil, helps renew the soil, so breathes and bears fruit. Then the plants aid both the atmosphere, right, exchanging oxygen with the atmosphere, providing us with oxygen, and of course helps itself as the evolutionary plan a stage. In the vegetable phase, we start developing the autonomic functions, right? The functions that will later make us breathe, or our heart beats without us having any conscious of it. And then in the animal phase, he talks about the animal that is useful to the soil on which it grows, acquiring experiences. So the animal interacting with the environment helps also Earth to evolve and helps itself. So when we are in the animal phase, we start developing instinct and very rudimentary intelligent phases, right? On our evolutionary path. Again, the animals, we go through the animal phase as a spiritual principle. When we reach the mammal phase, it's individual. Each animal already is an individual spiritual principle, not spirit, and already has what we discussed last week, in the Q&A, the protoform, not the perispirit, just a different name to differentiate perispirit. That is our spiritual body when we become independent individual spirits on our beginning of our evolutionary path. And then he comes to us, our own souls, the ongoing journeys through varied forms, meaning several reincarnations, acquiring qualities in each incarnation that are indispensable for sublime ascent. We are children of eternity, acting for the glory of the true life. And only going through this evolutionary path, in accordance to the divine law, we will reach the final objective, which is to become a perfected spirit. Okay, lot of information condensed in one small paragraph, right, Elmo?
Yeah, it's the whole mechanism of evolution of Andre Luiz. Was the title of the book again?
Evolution in 2 words.
Evolution in 2 words. It's the whole book in one paragraph right there.
Yeah, it's incredible, the ability of the superior spirits to say everything in a very short description, right? A lot of when you read a lot of descriptions, you see Leonardo, it took us a troubled spirit. It took paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs to describe his struggles, right? And Clarencio explained something very simple and complex in one paragraph.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions, comments here? Okay, let's continue, Sarayda.
Okay. Antonina, who seemed more awake than her companion for the contemplation of the exquisite picture around us, asked in amazement, why don't we have a living memory of our previous lifetimes? Wouldn't it be a blessed happiness to consciously meet again those whom we love the most? Yes, yes, confirmed Clarencio, as we continue on a delightful journey. But in our present spirit condition, we don't know how to orient our desires toward what is best. Our love is still an insignificant fragment of light buried in darkness of our egotism. like gold hidden the earth in infinitesimal portions in a huge amount of ore, just as the fibers of the brain are the last to be consolidated within the physical vehicle in which we incarnate. A complete memory of our past lifetimes is the last altar we set up in the temple of our soul, which on this planet is still in its early phases of development. That is why our memories are fragmentary. Yet, from lifetime to lifetime, from ascent to ascent, our memory gradually changes into an imperishable vision on behalf of our immortal spirit. But if we could recognize our former loved ones, and if we could see the faces of former friends again and recognize them, ventured Antonina respectfully. Contacting the best ones again would entail contacting the worst ones too, interrupted Clarenceau. And inarguably, we haven't yet acquired balance and pure love, which is devoted to the higher designs without passion. We still cannot desire without disdaining, assist without harming. For now, our ability is to love sufferers' deplorable inclinations. Without the temporary forgetfulness of our former lives, we couldn't receive yesterday's enemy into our heart to regenerate both ourselves and him. The law is wise. Whatever the case may be, however, let's not forget that our spirit makes note of all the steps of its journey, archiving in itself all the events of life to form a map of its destiny in accordance with the principle of cause and effect that govern our pathway. But only much later, when we love and wisdom have supplemented the chemistry of our thoughts, will we acquire supreme serenity capable of encompassing the past in every aspect. The minister paused briefly, smiled paternally at us and continued. The law is invariable, the law. Wherever we may be, we live with the result of our actions, just as the tree on any spot of land produces according to its own species. The firmament seems to respond to the remarkable lecture. Flocks of gentle birds were roosting in the bushes that shone not far away. The sun began to send out perceptible rays, which caused indefinable combinations of color and light unknown, as yet to ordinary earthly measurements. Like a blessed, colorful hive of love, a harmonious house appeared before us. Hundreds of laughing children were playing among the springs and flowers in its marvelous garden.
Okay, so that's the end of the chapter. But this part here discusses a very important and discussed and questioned subject, which everyone that comes to Spiritism and starts studying Spiritism asks always, why don't we remember our previous existences? Why don't we remember our past life? Why don't we have a living memory of our previous lifetime? Wouldn't it be blessed happiness to consciously meet again those whom we love the most? And Clarencio says, yes, it will be lovely. But in our present spiritual condition, we don't know how to orient our desires towards its path. That love is an insignificant fragment of life, insignificant part of ourself, buried in darkness of our selfishness, right? Like gold hidden in the infinitesimal portions of ore, right? So he explains here that as the fibers of the brain are the last to be consolidated within the physical vehicle in which we reincarnate, he gives an information that the last part that forms on our on building our new physical body in the pregnancy is the fibers of the brain, is our brain. And he tells us that a complete memory of our past lifetimes is the last thing we are going to set up as we become perfected spirit. And on this planet, we're still in the early phases of development. But our memories, so that's why our memories are fragmentary. Sometimes some people have the ability to remember past flashes of previous physical existences, but without remembering the details. Sometimes you do this regression to past life, the past life therapies. Spiritism recommends it to be done only in cases of trauma, to address traumas and phobias, not out of curiosity, because if you do it out of curiosity, it can cause you some sort of damage, meaning, you may find yourself stuck in the past and not able to come back to the present life for different motives. So, but when you address a past life in a past life therapy to deal with phobias, that can be helpful because it frees you in this physical life from this phobia that is preventing you to move forward. Okay. So from lifetime to lifetime, as we evolve, our memory gradually changes, and we begin to have more access to our previous existences. Normally, the simple explanation that I always give is, you will remember your previous existences the moment you are ready to deal with it without any trauma. Okay. So if you remember a previous existence and that's going to leave you traumatized or leave you with scars, you are not ready to deal with it yet. If like when you remember things when you were a child that were important for you as a child, and now they are almost irrelevant because you are ready to deal and you matured. It's the same thing with our incarnations. As we become more prepared to deal with things that happened in our previous incarnations, we will be able to slowly start to remember them. And Clarencio mentions here, remember, contacting the best ones again will entail contacting the worst ones too. So you're not going to remember only your loved ones, you're going to remember all your enemies. And we are really not prepared for that. If we were, natural law will have a way to allow us to remember. And then he stresses that without the temporary forgetfulness of our former lives, we couldn't receive yesterday's enemy into our heart to regenerate both ourselves and him or her, right? So if you have, let's say, the closest relationship, which is a mother and a child, if they both remember that they were enemies of the past, it would make the relationship much more difficult. I know the relationships between mother and children are not easy all the times. There is a lot of difficult ones, but the love that a mother has for her son or daughter in the beginning of their lives is the law that is the love that is there to overcome these differences and to begin to heal old wounds, right? So if you don't have the forgetfulness of the past, it would make it much more difficult. So Clarencio tells us, only much later, when love and wisdom have sublimated the chemistry of our thought. What does it mean? When love and wisdom becomes part of who we are, not a construction that we have to make an effort. And again, love, wisdom, the two wings of evolution, the moral evolution and intellectual evolution. One cannot fully exist without the other. You can evolve more on one side, but it reaches a point where you have to stop and evolve the other side. Otherwise, you cannot evolve. You need to evolve. To fly, you need both wings. You need both wings to work in conjunction, right? So when we become love and wisdom fully, we will have the supreme serenity to address our past in every aspect, but only then, and we still a long way to go. Still, as he says here before, our ability to love suffers deplorable inclinations. We cannot desire without disdaining, assist without harming. The law is always wise, so it's there for a reason. And then, Andre Luiz talks a little bit about the poetic aspects of Andre Luiz writing that I always remember. Our friend Gabi that we used to come to our classes a long time ago, and she said, I cannot read Andre Luiz, it's too poetic for my German taste. And every time I read his poetic writings of Andre Luiz, I remember her. Elmo, anything to add here?
Yeah, I think my son has German previous incarnation. He cannot read those books for the same reason. He feels this tremendous amount of waste of words to say something. But Jesus told us, right, suggest to us, on the way to the altar, if you have a quarrel with your enemy, with your brother, put down your gifts, go back, and what's the word?
Reconcile.
Yeah, reconcile you with your brother before you reach to the judge. I think I make a relationship with that statement when Clarence suggests to us that, unfortunately, we do not have proper orientation of our desires to seek what is best or to desire what is best. Because we desire the things that gives the short, momentaneous illusion of happiness. No one wants to go back and seek forgiveness or seeking to repair the mistakes that you have done. We all wants to go and enjoy the loved ones or the good things that we have in life and forget that that's momentaneous. That the true happiness is the ability to return and to repair with your brother what you have done. That is the duties. That is one of reasons of reincarnation. Because very often, have the opportunity to do that in the spiritual world. And that's why we do reincarnate, as Andre Luiz places here to us, with individuals that if you could remember who they really were, would make, if not impossible, extremely difficult to repair. So divine providence is so benevolent that allow us to do what Jesus suggests. Go back and repair with your brothers and sisters what you had needs to be repaired, even when you're not sure that that's what we are doing. And if we had that understanding, have that remembrance, would be, again, if not impossible, very, very difficult.
Okay. All right. Any questions, comments? That's it for us today. We studied both chapters. Next month, we are going to go to the Lar da Bênção. In Portuguese means a blessing home, which is the spiritual colony that we will find Julio and Antonina's and the other lady's son. Okay. Okay, any questions, comments? All right, so let's talk a little bit about what's coming next. Today is the launching of another edition of the Spiritist Review that is published in several languages. I'm going to copy the link here on the chat for those that want to open it directly. Of course, you're going to receive through our email, and you can access the International Spiritist Council website. But this is what is important. It's the first time that it is coming in digital format, also in English, because before that English was only available on the PDF form, and now you can fully enjoy reading it in the digital form, meaning in any digital tool that you have. So I invite you all to read it. There are very interesting articles in it. I helped translate some of the articles, and also our friend Luis translated. I recommend especially the first article called Spiritism and Science by Xavier Sampaio. It's a beautiful article, very enlightened. Take a moment and read it because it's worth your time. It was translated by our friend Luis. Okay. And there is the launching of the magazine. There is a live today at 2 p.m., but that's only in Portuguese. So for us here, there's only me, Eric, and Elmo that could watch it. So I'm not going to advertise it much. Tomorrow we are open. It's July 3. SASGNY is open if you want to come. But July 4th, of course, the 4th of July, Jussara's class will not happen. The Spiritism at noon on July 4th will not happen. Okay, and then back on Thursday with the book, the study of the Spirit's book. We are starting the last book, book 4 of the Spirit's book, Hopes and Consolations. If you want to join us in our studies, next Sunday, second Sunday of the month, we go back to the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism. That was done by Zoraida last month, and she will tell Elmo where we stopped and what we discussed, so we can continue next Sunday. Okay. I think that's it for us. The book club is on a break until mid of August. Zoraida, can you do our closing prayer, please?
Yes, absolutely. And now, as we come to the end of our beautiful lesson here today, we ask our Father, our beloved spiritual benefactors, our guardian angels, for being here with us, explaining and giving us what is needed to understand our book of Between Heaven and Earth, where we understand it, take it with us, and relate it in our lives, and helping us understand why we're here, where we came from, and where we're going. May we continue throughout the week with our prayers, helping all that are in need in this planet Earth and in the spiritual world, all that are in hospitals and hospices, for the war that continues in Ukraine. May our prayers guide the leaders that continue to lead these countries. We ask for the help and strength of our spiritist centers, for SGNY, and all that are working with enlightenment of here and in the spiritual world. We ask for the blessings of our family members and loved ones and all that are in need, dear Father. May we continue throughout the week in our homes with prayers and studies, and helping us to continue the path of our Father. With our hearts full of gratitude, we thank our teachers who have given us this lesson today. And may we be meeting again next week and continue our studies and throughout the week. And with this in mind, dear Lord, we ask permission to close our meeting today. So be it.